competing in, we are repeating it, we are believing in. It's time for us to shift our mind from best in the world to best for the world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. It creates a new world to mind a shift, intentionality, perceptuality, conceptuality. We are choosing to shift our mind to best for the world, best for our world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional.
Welcome to Best for the World broadcast and this fantastic topic for today's talk here. My name is Stella Nordahl, and together with me I have Anna Blixt-Thomsen. So we're going to talk about school and life.
Yes, we are. I'm
what
looking
a
forward
fantastic
to
topic.
it.
Yeah, really. Just to help people out here, what do we mean when we talk about school and life? Could you help us out, Anna?
So, well, this is school as a broad topic. It's a big topic, but some of the points that we were talking about is the notion of school altogether and how we tend to take for granted that school is one thing, and it's something that everyone has to do, and it's a good thing that everyone has to do, and then we often don't question much more about it. But the fact is that there are many different kinds of schools, there are many different ways of doing schools, and there are certainly also many ways that we are impacted by the schooling that we've experienced. And then we can take it even further and question it even more. And so that's an invitation that I have. School is an interesting topic because everyone has been through it, unless you're severely, from a very, very poor place or sick, everyone in the whole world has a reference for what it means to go to school. And it's something that I think we're not having sufficiently nuanced discussions about school and how it impacts us, and also what kind of schooling we want for our children in the future.
It's interesting to say that almost all people have some kind of a reference. The interesting thing here is that it's not the same reference.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's one of the topics for this conversation also. What happens if you have another type of experience, and can you have another type of experience, and what will then happen? If I take myself as an example, school was nice to me, but I also know that it wasn't like that for everyone in my class. Back then I didn't reflect on it like that, but in a retrospective, I would say school wasn't nice to everyone, and I believe it could have been,
right?
But it wasn't. So, and that doesn't mean that I'm saying it was the problem itself was the school, but it was the school was a part of a system that didn't see those children that had other needs or other possibilities or other capabilities than I had. Yeah. So school was nice to me, at least. So what was your own experience from your school?
Yeah, so it was actually, I feel, a kind of a special beginning, because my mom, when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and my mom, she was a single mom, and she had to decide what school to place me in. There was like a local normal public school down the street, and she told me how she had like a feeling like in her heart, if I have such a creative, expressive, lively child, and if I put that child in that normal public school, it's going to destroy her. So she started looking for alternative schools, and then one day we were on a train, and she met a class that had just come, small children that had come, they had gone fishing for tadpoles at a lake, and they were like carrying their little, fishing poles and everything. And she was so blown away by the way that the children were acting and how happy they were and how harmonic they were. And, they were just naturally courteous and friendly. And so she asked them, what school are you from? And then they shared that. And that was a democratic free school, a Freinet school, which is a specific type of democratic free school based on the philosophy of the French educator Célestin Freinet. So I went to that school most of my schooling. And that's like a very creative, very free, very alternative to what we know, like the normal type of public school.
You and I were born in two different countries.
Right.
But it's quite close, both Scandinavian countries. You from Denmark, I from Sweden.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the public school looks like in Denmark, but I would say that I didn't question at all the structures or anything like that when I was in school. That was for me what school was like. Did you experience it that way as you were into an alternative? I mean, did you reflect on that, or was that your school and that was your experience back then?
Well, the only thing that comes up when I'm looking at it is that when we were going home from school, I lived quite far away, so I had to take a train and a bus, and we would go with the kids from the other public school. And so we used to compare ourselves to them. I remember that there was like a different culture. And when we were like 12 and we were going into confirmation training, as people do here in Scandinavia, people who are either Protestant or just want that part. And when we were doing that and we were having this, so you learn about the Bible and Jesus and all of that. And when we were doing that training with the priest, half the kids were from the public school and the other half was from my school. And there was such a distinct difference because we were like engaging the priest and like engaging in conversation and discussions and like, wow, and why did Jesus do that? And the other kids were just so quiet. And I think that's the first time where I really noticed that, we were different, that it was that we were raised in a different kind of culture where children are encouraged to participate.
So maybe we should say something about our hidden agenda, so it's not hidden any longer.
Okay.
Maybe we should tell
what is the hidden
audience.
agenda?
Maybe, I don't know, but I would say we can tell them a little bit. I mean, the audience right now, we want people to engage in this conversation, of course, and right now it's just you and me. So the idea that you and I have been talking about, so we can spread that and share it already, is that we would like to see, okay, so what alternatives are there on how to manage school and how to see school and life in connection and in relation to each other, and should school and life be different from each other, or should it be the same? I mean, we can call it school, but it's actually life. And it's a lot of years during the life. In my case, I was in school for many years. First we have 10 at that, when I went to school, it was 9 years of mandatory school, and then we have we call it in Sweden gymnasium, so it was another 3 years, and then I came into university studies, and I was there for another 7-8 years. So it took like an eternity and beyond until I managed through those years. And I didn't actually, I would say not even once, reflect upon alternatives at that point. That's something that came up much later. But what we want to do, you and I, is to show that there are other ways, and what do they have, what do they do, and why do they do it. And it's not just because of having an alternative. It's more like, okay, so we're standing right now in a time where change is just happening to us, and how can we then make change not only happening to us, but more intentionally create the change we want. Yes. And those schools, I mean, we have seen a lot of you talk now about Freinet. That's one concept. We're going to have some talks about you and I, we visited a school a couple of years ago, which was also a democratic school called Sudbury Valley School. We will have actually in this series now, this weekend, we will have a conversation with the people engaged in a neo-humanistic school called Kupa Kupu on Bali. And there are a lot of systems. Just to mention some, Montessori is one. Waldorf, you have been engaged in some Waldorf schools also?
Yes,
Yeah?
Montessori as well. Yeah.
Okay, you have, okay. And yeah, there are a lot of different concepts. So one is to just look at them as, and what experiences do they create in people, in both those who work there and in the kids that are in those systems. And what do they do? I shouldn't say differently, but more intentionally, I would say. What intentionally, what kind of assumptions do they do when they look at the world? And have they practices that are, we could say, maybe not one school for every kid, but maybe ways of working that could be on a more general aspect and also connecting to life then. And so, yeah, more intentionally choose what kind of school system do we want.
Well, one of the things I think can be an advantage of having a school that has a specific pedagogical stance, like Montessori or Waldorf, or probably the school that you're talking about in Bali, which is probably even more ideological. And we have even now, like there in Copenhagen or in Denmark, there's a lot of like new free schools blossoming. And what I've seen, working as a teacher for many years and now also as a coach for teachers and consulting in schools, is that they're not necessarily better. I will say that. A Montessori school doesn't have to be better than a normal average public school, but a difference can be is that there is the intention. So there is already from the get-go an awareness about how is it that we want to do things, and thereby a questioning and thereby a self-reflection. And that in itself is like a really good, important first step, I would say, for any enterprise, any organization. Whereas in the public schools, and this is probably true for like other workplaces as well, is that, it's just a public school. And so what the directives that they're following is the ones set out by the municipality. And if a country has that, the region, or like in Sweden's case, the national curriculum. And so we have like a national curriculum or a national set of policies that all schools in Sweden needs to follow. And so for a public school, they don't really have any requirements beyond that, beyond what is asked of all schools. And so the risk with that is that it will not go the extra mile of constantly having that like self-reflection. But then on the other side of that, which I've seen, for example, in Waldorf, is that it can also become like a little bubble where, the thing that made it open and reflective can also make it closed and unwelcome to new thoughts. And that's kind of interesting when looking at, the whole intentional aspect of it.
Yeah, and a third part of our now not longer hidden agenda, more open agenda, is that we want to be open in this, you and I, and listen in and so on. So as far as that we can, as persons, we're going to step behind ourselves and also use our own experiences as a tool to see, okay, how can we do this, and what kind of experiences do we want to create in ourselves and in our kids, and also what kind of experience do we not want to create. That's also important, I guess, to have some kind of an idea on, and as you have that, then steer from it and not get stuck to it. So I would say intent could be both what you want to have and what you don't want to have, but with a focus on what you want.
Yes.
So that's our not any longer now hidden agenda. So that's the topic of those. We hope for maybe some during this weekend, some conversations with people from different school systems. And if you listen into this and you have an experience you want to share, please contact me or Anna. We can set up some kind of a dialogue on it. There is still spots during this weekend, and we can continue this, of course, these conversations if we want. And so if you want to engage, please let us know. And it could be fantastic. I mean, you and I, we have our experiences, but they are limited to us as persons and those systems we have seen. Yeah, I can tell a little bit more about my experiences from my school. And as I said, I didn't reflect on the form itself. It was just what it was.
Was it a public school you went to?
Yeah, it was a public school. But during the years, it looked very different. First, I went to quite a small school in an area in the city I grew up, where people moved in. So there was a lot of people coming into this area, and it was quite a small school. We had 2 parallel 1st to 6th grade, and yeah, so in that sense, everyone more or less knew everyone. Maybe not the older kids really knew the younger, but again, we were living in the same area, so you had some kind of knowledge about everyone. All the teachers we have some kind of a relation to, and so on. So it was quite a small school. And the interesting thing with this school was it was a public school at that point. Many years later, I actually came back to this school in a totally different. I didn't realize up until the night before I was going there. I was going there as a consultant, working with together with 2 more people and the headmaster of the. And it was then a couple of years before sold to some kind of a private school system, and they were having large problems with. I would say again, as people moved into this area, it was a tough environment to have a school in. And I realized just the day before that it was my old school I was coming to, and such an odd experience walking into a school I hadn't been for more than 20 years, I guess. I can't say exactly, but maybe 25 years. And then walking the same corridors. Outside it looked a little bit different. They had put some color upon the walls and so on, but inside it looked exactly the same. Very odd experience, and totally different. At the same time, it was exactly the same.
I'm sure you must have had some almost like body reactions. I feel like that when you go to places like that, it's like you have these reactions. You're not even. So it's like the body remembers in a way, even though you don't have necessarily.
Yeah, going to having lunch, going to the gymnastics, having. I also there were memories coming up, of course, at that point. And again, school was quite nice to me. So even if I at some point, I guess I came into being bullied a little bit, but it both had a start and an end. So it was not in the first years. It was more like maybe 4th, 5th grade, and then it came to an end. So it's not that it's an essential part of my first 6 years in school, but it was one part of them, and that also were reflections I had at that point. And as you say, it's in the body, and one strong feeling I had was actually, this is so stupid. We were having like a tournament in chess, and I believe I was quite good in chess, but I was also very empathic, and the guy I was meeting in this chess game didn't know anything about chess, so I instructed him and he won. And that was funny.
It's funny that's the memory that sticks out. I have one like very particular memory from school where we were going to do a circus, and I was going to be an acrobat, and I was so looking forward to it. And then my mom and I went there on the day, and then it was the wrong day. We came at the wrong date and time. And that is like, that memory is also like etched into me. But what I often talk about when I talk to people about school, and because it's the way that we remember school and the way that we relate to school, is that, what is it actually that we remember? And the funny thing is that when you ask people about it, what they do remember is the people, the relationships, the social interactions. very, very rarely do you remember like anything that was actually taught to you. You know, then it was like either really, really good or really, really bad. But that's kind of interesting, is that the social aspect is more like a side thing, but then at the same time, that's like the essence of it, the essence of the experience.
There is an extremely interesting exercise that I've done in many contexts and situations, and that is, if you listen now to this conversation, give a second or a millisecond maybe to just name a good teacher. That comes up immediately, and also the opposite, of course, it comes immediately. But we really know those good teachers. We know them by heart, and so what did they do? How did they look at the world? How did they relate to people and relate to you and so on? It's very easy actually to have a good learning example, so to say, from a good teacher, because we all have them.
Example,
we all have them, and even if it was I guess for a lot of people maybe school wasn't the best place and the best context, very often there is at least one person standing out and just being there as a good example for how a person should act. So, and I believe that is maybe more important than the system itself. But as you said just before, that if there is an intent behind how you look at learning, the learning, I mean, there are a lot of words for it. Teaching is one. That for me, that's a very one direct. You know this better than me, I guess. You're much more into school and schooling and how that works. But for me, teaching is like, I have an answer and I'm now telling it to you. And learning for me could be that. It could also be that I learn from you, you learn from me, and it could also be that we learn together. And there are so many ways to have new experiences. And my question to us is then, how many ways of learning does a system allow and embrace and amplify, or I don't know how to
so
say.
This I think is the problem when we speak about school, is that even though there exists a lot of different methods, there is still like a structure that's the same. So you gather a bunch of kids, usually the same age, which we didn't have when I was in Frenay. My class was 15 kids from 1st to 6th grade, and then divided in 2 groups. So we were 2 groups of 15. But anyway, a normal school is like you put a bunch of kids who are the same age in the same room with one adult. And that adult is then responsible for teaching them. Then, of course, there can be variations. There can be 2 adults, or the adults can be changing. And then you have a big building and all the people are in different rooms. And then what then happens and how the day progresses can be very different. But that like setup, you come in the morning, you go home in the afternoon. And I think we take it so much for granted that that's the way it should be. You have a bunch.
I love it, Anna, that you take this up before, because I have the same idea, not same idea, but I have the same reflection here, that it's quite odd. It's like, what is your date of production? And then you go in there and you come out there 10 years later or 15 years later. So it's like, production line. You go first.
Because the school that we know, the school that exists now, is built on a factory model. That's the whole, it was built in the industrial era, as a, it has to be efficient, it has to be cost effective. So really the form is not based on pedagogics. It's not based on the best and optimal way children learn.
It's we believe that it's based on science, but that's not the case, I guess.
No, and a lot of, actually very, very much of how school is conducted today, it goes directly against research. So for example, just a very little example is that we know from research that the optimal size of a school class for kids to really learn and get the most out of it as they can is 15 children. Yet most classes in Sweden, for example, has 28, 30, in some countries it's even more students. even though we know from science. We know from science and from research that play is very, very important for children's learning, yet we minimize play. So we actually do a lot of things that are directly contradictory to children actually learning.
And counterproductive, then I would say. Whatever it creates, it's something we have to deal with in society for the rest of those people's lives, and maybe also in coming generations. There was a school, I was working with a school for a couple of years ago. I work with leadership and development of organizations and so on. And in this school, the headmaster here had an idea, which I really believe is interesting, saying that the teachers of today, they are more or less stuck in their value-based environment where they had their best teachers in. If they look upon how teaching and learning should be, their best examples comes from when they were kids, maybe 30, 40 years ago. And we also know that values inherits at least 2 generations, so you can go back another 30, 40 years, and then you're back 70 years in value, and which values do we see as important? And then we are in the end of the Second World War and that era that comes after that. And those are values, of course, that were probably right at that time. The thing is they're still right today? Is it even, how can I say it, relevant? We don't know.
Right.
So I believe he had a point there, this guy, and I've thought of it a lot, because that means that we have to really, really at a deep level do something different. You can call it change, but
and a big thing, I think, what I experience is that teachers really try, and the schools really try. There's nothing wrong with their intentions.
No, I don't question that at all.
No, exactly. And I think it's important also not to question that, because I was thinking about this the other day, that we're so good at criticizing the system. But it's like everyone is just doing their best.
Yeah. But at the same time, Anna, we're also a part of the system, so we can't blame the system.
Yes, exactly. And that's the kind of the point that I was coming to as well, is that, well, now I lost my train of thought.
Oh, sorry.
But that's okay. But because the thing is that we are the system. It doesn't exist as a separate entity from us as human beings. Well, maybe the point was kind of like, that no one is thinking, I'm a parking officer, and I'm gonna give you a ticket because we hate you, or the system, or the social workers who remove people from their children. They're all just doing their job. We're all just doing our best, and that can be limited, and it can be racist, and it can be all kinds of things that aren't good. But it's like no one is like, I don't think anyone is seeing themselves as the system, and there's always a reason for that person, usually trauma or pain or hurt, for that person acting in that way. Anyways, it's a whole other thing. But anyway, so with
but you got a really good point there. So
I lost what I was gonna say anyway.
Yeah, sorry. What I was thinking of is like at some level it's not about you, but at some level it's all about you.
Yes. Yeah.
So okay, so I believe that what we're talking about here for people who have come so far into this is a live broadcast, but you can of course watch it later, is that we're talking about school and life, and what we are sharing right now are both our personal experience, but also the ideas we have on how can we look at the alternative ways of school and life, and see if there is something there that we can use for creating the future intentionally together. And
I remember what I was going to say now.
Go for it.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, because you were talking about the values and how it carries through, and whether the values we're representing now as adults if it's actually relevant for the children now. And
Mhm.
so one of the things I've experienced with teachers in schools is that we have all these nice slogans, everyone be friends, and here we're all equal, and all these, like, it's so beautiful and sounds so good, but are you truly deeply as a person really living that? Like, are you really deeply representing that? And I think, most people aren't, because we're all just making this thing up as we go, we're all just
Yeah.
learning. And so I think it's so important for adults to be more real with children, to be more authentic. So it doesn't become, I'm trying to teach them something, like, let's say about sustainability, that I haven't lived it, I haven't embodied it. We're learning together.
When you say this, there is popped something up into my mind also, and that is, I don't know how to explain it, but okay, so at some point we can say all these things, but does the worldview we have allow those things to happen?
How do
For
you mean?
instance, if we talk about together
Mhm.
and we have a society based upon competition, or we can take another example. We say trust, but we have a system that controls.
Yeah. Or we
Or
say
we say,
democracy, and we have
yeah,
how do you say, mandatory school attendance.
yeah.
School is not a right in
Mhm.
Sweden. You have to do it. You don't have a
Mhm.
choice.
Yeah, and that's also interesting, of course. And there could be more contradictions, or of course, you have to have some kind of I mean, if you have those either and ors, because I guess some of them, I believe in both and, but at some point there are contradictory things, and as you say, you work for something, but as you do it, you actually counterproductive to what you want. And what I'm thinking of is that to identify those
Mm.
and see, okay, so if we talk about together, okay, what do we then need to change in the structures and culture to be able to have togetherness, and maybe replace competition with that. And we can take another thing. We say that people should learn as they, and you also have those scientific proofs on play and growth mindset and stuff like that. And then we put a digit on a person, and we believe that it's legible to do that, and that it means something that is of importance. I'm not saying it's wrong, but what I'm saying is, what happens when you do that, and is it relevant at that point? Maybe it is. Is that digit on that person relevant 15, 20 years later? And that's how we use it. So if you have your grades, you're going to live with them for the rest of your working life, I guess, at least as it is today. And not being too much pointing out and saying it's wrong. It's more that the reflection again. Okay, what does that create? Are there alternatives way to do it? And what do we want with it? Is it just because, or is it of a reason? And what is that reason? And can it be done otherwise? That would be super interesting to explore here together.
So a big shift, if we were to make like a very simplistic shift in thought when it comes to school, it would be school for learning versus school for the system. Because the whole thing with grades and everything, and like I was saying before, the notion of modern schooling, the way it's conducted, all of that is like in a societal context. We need workers, we need people who are educated, we need, civic people who can act civilized. The whole thing is like, you need to become something so that you're useful for society. But what if we, and the whole, and this is like a delusion we're collectively having, that school is for learning. I've just shown you that it's not, because if it were, we would be following the experts and the scientists who are showing us what makes children learn.
Yeah,
So
and we
I'm
wouldn't
really,
have a society saying to Greta that it's not relevant. I mean, she's telling us just listen to good science, and we're saying why. So
yeah,
that's interesting.
and that's due to our education, right?
Yeah.
But so what if we shifted focus
Mm,
from you need to become something for society to actually learning?
mm,
Like, what if we put learning in the driving seat but in a real way. You not in a
Mhm.
like we're pretending we're doing it, but we're really delusional way. But the thing is that opens up a whole other can of worms,
Mm.
because it begs the question of how do people learn. And that opens up the door to, well, everyone has different learning styles, everyone has different needs, but now we have a system where, it's as tightly squeezed as it possibly can financially. They keep taking money out of the school system. It's like the only thing left to do is replace teachers with robots,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
give
maybe that's
each.
one way forward. Of course, I mean there are a lot of ways. That's also one way, and we should be aware of that. That is one way. And what I'm thinking of
Absolutely.
here is that some of the learning, it could definitely be depending on how you learn, but it is also when you learn and where you learn.
Yes.
And I would say the last year have given us proof, I guess, that there are new ways or other ways to do this. I don't say that it's always the best, but it could be. And we also know that for some people it has been like a fantastic year, and for other people it has been a disaster.
Yeah.
And again, maybe not being stuck in one way,
Yeah.
opening up for new ways. My son, he had in Sweden, we haven't closed the schools because of the pandemic. We have found ways forward.
Yeah.
Some of the schools have had for smaller children, just as they normally do, but with a little bit more careful about how we interact and so on. And for the little, for the the older kids, and for people in university and so on, we have schooling from, I don't know what it's called, on distance school. And the interesting thing here was that up until Christmas this year, my son, he is 13, so he's in 7th grade in the Swedish system. And after Christmas, when everyone was supposed to coming back, they started with 2 weeks of distance school, and it worked out very well. He's going to a Montessori school, so they are used to work by themselves and together, and they do their planning and so on. So it worked very well, almost better, I would say. And he really liked it, and they had fantastic ideas. That one of the teachers, they had a project there where it was what do you call the I don't know the English word here, when you have träslöjd, help me out.
Woodwork.
Yeah, woodwork. I don't know what the topic is, but okay. So the idea here is that you work with your hands and so on. So the idea was to find something in your home that has been used for something, and you're going to change it to be used for something else. So that was very interesting, and so they had a lot of those ideas. And then after 2 weeks, they were supposed to get back to school, and so they did, and they were there for a week. And then my son got a small flu, or so he had to stay home, for all those extreme days. Not only we should have done that before, staying home 2 or 3 days, but we didn't before. Now we're staying home 7, 8 days or 10. So maybe in between. So then I asked, okay, so couldn't he just join the Google Classroom and the stream that you had? No, we have taken that down. And I said, why did you do that? Yeah, because now everyone is at school. Yeah, but not my son. He is home because he can't go to school because he has a flu. And yeah, but we can't do that. So why can't you do it? You just did it. So there was like it was possible at some point, but at some point it wasn't possible. But I would say, what happens if we make a both and, saying that, okay, today, Anna, you can't join because you're having a flu, but you can work from home. So you do it in this way.
Something that I often think about, when I think about school, is like how there are no spaces, or very few spaces often, for like being like calm and being quiet. And especially for a lot of like the more introverted children, or the children who have some kind of neurological diagnosis, that's one of the things that I would really want there to be in school. That we're not talking enough about how this is the children's working environment, and it's a very you're constantly being stimulated. And just a change like that, you know, to make the spaces more inviting for people who have different needs, you know, that it doesn't have to be like full on 6 to 8 hours a day, 30 kids in a room, you know. It's like I was saying before, we're really like squeezing it. And there are, maybe for you, like you had the type of brain that work well with that type of environment, but there are so many kids
I'm into squeezing.
No, but who are like very, like, you know, kids who are very academic, who are very literal, who are very you know, they have already like a natural discipline, or like a, you know, an ability to focus and all of that. And so and that's one of the things that I feel is so tragic, is that we put the blame on the children. Then we call them lazy, or we call them troublemakers, when in reality they're just not able to adapt to the environment in the same way. And if we would just make little changes sometimes, it would go a long way to help those kids.
Yeah, and I believe that again, as we can do in this show, what we are now creating, this is the first maybe out of, I don't know, 2 or 200, we don't know. And that's also interesting. If you don't have to have an answer, you can pose a question, and you can go for that for a while until you pose a new question. And right now we're posing the questions of school and life, how can they relate, and so on. And yeah, let's explore and see how far we want to explore. And maybe that is also one way of working, because again, at some point we have the synchron learning. We need to be in the same Zoom room right now, you and I, to have this conversation. But there are a lot of things that you can do, not only by yourself, but in a context where time and space is not that relevant. I mean, we have platforms today that are helping people to learn at the time and space where it fits them.
Yeah.
And still being able to interact in forums or whatever it is. That's at least how I do my own development and so.
And I love the fact that I'm like, we just got guinea pigs. You can see them in the background here. And so I can, like, okay, we want to have guinea pigs. I can go on YouTube. I start following a lady who's really serious about it. I check a couple of different videos. I find research that people have done. I find a Facebook group where people can support each other. And, you know, by immersing myself in such a process, within a few weeks to a few months, I can actually get really good at how to take care of guinea pigs. And it's such a smooth, effortless, natural process. It isn't, you know, it's like, and it's self-directed. I'm doing it myself, and I'm doing it because there's an interest, and this is something that matters to me. And it's like, why can't learning be that? And then of course there's a whole question of like learning how to navigate the internet, because it's not as simple, you know, just clicking on a Wikipedia page and then you're an expert.
It's not like that, but it's one way, of course.
Yeah.
And
you
that's
do
also
the same when you want to learn something. How do you do?
Yeah, again, I realized a couple of years ago that I was in some of the topics that I am present within, for instance, leadership and worldview and so on. I realized that I'm in front of something here. I have to find people that are that can have that kind of dialogue, but I also need to connect with those who are at another level of their learning, and so I need both of them, and I also need something from I mean, almost a seed from the future dragging me in that direction. So I need to have all of those. I love
that.
Yeah, I really love it. And there is so much interesting things that comes up into your own learning if you're open to something that wants to be said, or something that wants to be heard or created. And that's a huge learning for me as a person, that there is, I mean, we are taught again, and I don't say that it's wrong, but that causality always goes from then until now, or into the future. But we don't really know that actually. So it's just something we have decided upon. And I don't say it's wrong, but it could be that there is also another direction. I don't know how it works.
Oh man, I love this topic. This is like, you know, it's like right at your fingertips, like you can touch it and it's like there, but it's not quite there, because you know, this is a whole other thing. It's like time.
Yeah,
The
maybe I can
question
tell you about the story, which means why we are sitting here, because there is a story. I haven't told you this, Anna, I guess yet. Maybe I did yesterday when we spoke about. Okay, I take it here so that everyone have heard it. So a couple of weeks ago, I was late one night at home fixing something, and I had the telly on. And in Sweden, we have an educational program channel called UR Play. So it was like ongoing there, interesting things. And at some point there was this is not the school we're talking about just before, but it is a school on Bali called the Green School. And I was, wow, what a documentary. It was 1 hour documentary about a school that I was blown away by. And I was, okay, I needed to share it with someone, and I have a colleague that has a kid in my son's age. So I texted her and said, okay, you should look at this together with your daughter. And then it took a day or something, and I got a text message back saying, yeah, I know someone who is also running a school in Bali. Okay. And I was so very, at that point, I was really, there is something about this Green School. So I talked to a lot of people about it, at least 4 or 5 people. And I realized another colleague of mine had been at Green School 2009, not knowing why she was there, just found herself during 48 hours detouring from Singapore to Bali to just visit this school. And so, okay, so maybe we should connect those schools. And I talked again to the first person and said, okay, who is this that you know there? Yeah, it's a woman called Didi, and she works at this Kupa Kupa school. It's on another area of Bali. It's another region, but she is in Sweden half time. So she's here in Sweden now, I guess. I saw it on Facebook. She's having a waffle place, and I believe they just opened. Okay, I said that's interesting. Maybe we could call her, and now comes the interesting part. For the last 4 weeks, we have planned for a conference, outdoor conference, which I was engaged in. And we were supposed to go to a place in the woods, walking to a little cabin. And do you know what was at that cabin? This waffle house, where this Didi made her waffles.
I know.
So it's quite interesting, because at that point, I've learned that in my life, when there is something that you could say, oh, it's by coincidence, when there are so many coincidences that it can't be a coincidence any longer, why should you doubt it? So now we're going to meet her, at least I don't know if you can, but on Monday I think it was at 8 or 9 in the Tableau, we have one schedule for talking to her, and she has been engaged in this Kupu Kupu school at Bali, and yeah, interesting. So there is something there.
I actually thought about going there as well, to the Green School in Bali.
You have thought about it? Okay, yeah, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should arrange a trip there.
That would be amazing. I've been to Bali, but that was many years before that existed.
So we're going to see if we can find also during the weekend this guy who started out the Green School. I think he's still engaged in it. So, and I will at least bring in some other school also into this conversations and see what we can find out there, Anna.
There's also a new school in Copenhagen that's called the Green Free School. Mm-hmm. That is also, I don't know if they're connected, but that's also another one of these like new blossoming, completely new concept, like totally out of the normal concept of school. But just before, you just kind of introduced me to a really like a topic that was like awakening my utmost spider senses, which is I called it non-linear education. Mm-hmm. And so it's like taking learning and education out of that whole idea that it's like a progression and a hierarchy and a linear progression towards, you know, a goal point. And that also brings in the beautiful topic of learning together, where the adult is not an expert or necessarily someone who knows everything, but where it can be like a process of exploration, and where you recognize that learning is organic. You know, sometimes you move faster, sometimes you have these growth spurts, Sometimes you have quantum leaps. Sometimes you need to fail at something over and over and over until you learn. And it's like, so learning is so much more.
Yeah. And
not
sometimes it
necessarily
has to be
complex.
linear. At other points or other times, it should not be linear.
Yes, like if you're learning medicine, for example, that's, you know, because people always ask me like, so what about formal schooling? Should it just go out the window? I'm like, no. Like if you need to learn all the bones in your body so you can operate on a person, of course you should learn that in like, you know, probably a rather linear way. For me, it makes total sense, but there's a time and place for everything. And a 6-year-old probably doesn't need to learn things in that way because they're at a totally different, you know, point of development.
Super interesting. Maybe we should wrap it up here and have some thoughts on what we can create this weekend during the Best for the World broadcast and beyond. Hopefully we can come back here with this concept called School and Life and see if we can find. And again, if you listen to this, even if it's 1 year later or 5 years later, we're still hopefully open for co-creation.
Yes, because time is relative. We're here.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I can find something on YouTube that wow, and then I see that the last comment was 60 years ago, and I mean, if someone answers, that would be interesting. Then I can comment and stuff like that. So yeah, so please engage and just contact us. We're both you and I guess you're also quite open on those different platforms. So just connect to us. Yeah, that's the best way.
We'll see how that is in 6 years.
Yeah, we don't know if they exist, so we can't mention them by name because we don't know if it's called YouTube or Facebook. It may be something else, the Footbook or I don't know. Yeah, why not?
MeTube and the Footbook.
MeTube and the Footbook. So okay, I'm looking here now for the. We started out with the intro and I'm having it as an outro, but now I can't find it again. I'm so interesting. I had it here. So maybe we just have to end by saying thanks and goodbye or something like that.
You can sing the song if you'd like.
Yeah, I could do that. I don't remember all of the text right now, but I should because I've heard it so many times now. So it's about intentional decisions and how we can open up for both intent and intuition into today's society, organizations, and our personal life. And school is, as we mentioned, one part of life, or life is one part of school. We don't know, but it has to be part of each other. And the best way if you have school here and you have life here, if you do like this, the best way if it's totally fit.
I thought you were going to do like this.
Yeah, it could be. It could be like that. Yeah. Okay, so take care, everyone. And thanks, Anna, for this. And see you soon again.
Bye.
Bye.